Welcome to History with Herodotus, where we delve into the depths of human experience, uncovering the complexities and nuances that shape our understanding of the world. Today, we embark on a journey through the labyrinthine corridors of power, deceit, and corruption as we explore one of the most pivotal events in modern American history, the Watergate Scandal. In the early 1970s, the United States was a nation torn apart by social unrest, economic turmoil, and the lingering shadows of the Vietnam War. It was an era of great upheaval, where trust in institutions was dwindling, and the divide between the government and its citizens was growing ever wider. Amidst this tumultuous backdrop, a series of events would unfold that would shake the very foundations of American democracy, leaving an indelible mark on the nation's psyche. To grasp the intricacies of the Watergate Scandal, we must first examine the man at the helm, Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States. Nixon's rise to power was marked by a fierce determination and an unyielding ambition, traits that would both propel him to greatness and ultimately seal his downfall. His presidency, which began in 1969, was characterized by a penchant for secrecy, a distrust of the media, and an unwavering commitment to maintaining power at all costs. As Nixon's administration navigated the treacherous waters of domestic policy and foreign relations, a culture of paranoia and vindictiveness began to permeate the White House. The president's closest advisors, including his trusted aide, H.R. Haldeman, and his Attorney General, John Mitchell, formed a tight-knit circle that would stop at nothing to protect Nixon's interests and advance his agenda. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party, still reeling from the devastating losses of the 1970 elections, was seeking to regain its footing and challenge the incumbent president in the upcoming 1972 election. The party's nominee, George McGovern, a stalwart liberal with a strong anti-war platform, posed a significant threat to Nixon's re-election prospects. In this charged atmosphere, a sense of desperation began to creep into the White House. Nixon's advisors, convinced that the Democrats would stop at nothing to undermine their candidate, became increasingly obsessed with gathering intelligence on their opponents and discrediting their campaign. It was within this context of fear, mistrust, and unbridled ambition that the seeds of the Watergate scandal were sown. In the summer of 1971, a group of Nixon's closest advisors, including his special counsel, Charles Colson, and the White House's chief plumber, Gil Krog, began to explore ways to discredit Daniel Ellsberg, the former Pentagon employee who had leaked the classified Pentagon Papers to the New York Times. This marked the beginning of a concerted effort by the Nixon administration to use illicit means to silence its critics and consolidate power. As the 1972 election drew near, the White House's obsession with intelligence gathering and sabotage only intensified. In June of that year, a group of burglars hired by the Committee to Re-elect the President, CREEP, was caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. The incident, though seemingly minor at the time, would set off a chain reaction of events that would ultimately lead to the downfall of the Nixon presidency and forever alter the course of American history. The cast of characters involved in this drama was vast and complex, with figures like G. Gordon Liddy, a former FBI agent turned creep operative, and E. Howard Hunt, a veteran CIA officer, playing key roles in the unfolding saga. As the news of the break-in at the Watergate complex began to spread, the Nixon administration's initial response was one of feigned ignorance and dismissal. On June 17, 1972, the day after the burglary, President Nixon himself downplayed the incident, characterizing it as a third-rate burglary of no real significance. However, behind closed doors, the White House was scrambling to contain the fallout and prevent any further investigation into the matter. In the days and weeks that followed, the Nixon administration's efforts to cover up the scandal only intensified. On June 23, 1972, Nixon ordered his aide, H.R. Haldeman, to instruct the CIA to halt the FBI's investigation into the break-in, citing national security concerns. This infamous conversation, captured on Nixon's secret White House tapes, would later become a crucial piece of evidence in the scandal. Meanwhile, two young reporters from the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, had begun to sniff out the story, sensing that there was more to the Watergate break-in than met the eye. Their tireless reporting and dogged pursuit of sources would ultimately help to unravel the tangled web of deceit and corruption that surrounded the Nixon administration. On July 16, 1972, Woodward and Bernstein published a story revealing that one of the Watergate burglars, James McCord, had ties to the CIA, sparking widespread speculation about the involvement of government agencies in the scandal. As the story continued to unfold, the Nixon administration's denials and excuses became increasingly implausible, and the American public began to sense that something was seriously amiss. In August 1972, a grand jury indicted the 5 men caught breaking into the Watergate complex, as well as 2 high-ranking officials from CREEP, G. Gordon Liddy and E. Howard Hunt. The indictments marked a significant escalation of the scandal, as it became clear that the break-in was not an isolated incident, but rather part of a larger pattern of illicit activity by the Nixon administration. As the summer of 1972 drew to a close, the Watergate scandal showed no signs of abating. On September 3, 1972, the New York Times reported that Attorney General John Mitchell had controlled a secret fund used to finance espionage activities against the Democratic Party, further solidifying the connection between the Watergate break-in and the highest levels of the Nixon administration. The following day, September 4, 1972, President Nixon delivered a speech in which he proclaimed his administration's innocence, stating that, "I can say categorically that no one in the White House staff, no one in this administration presently employed was involved in this very bizarre incident." This bold assertion would soon be revealed as a blatant lie. As the scandal continued to metastasize and the American public became increasingly skeptical of Nixon's claims of innocence, in October 1972, the FBI discovered a trail of evidence that led directly to the White House, including a $25,000 check from a Nixon campaign fund that had been used to pay for the Watergate burglars' expenses. This revelation sparked a new wave of outrage and demands for accountability, as it became clear that the Nixon administration's corruption went far beyond a simple break-in. As the evidence mounted, the Nixon administration's grip on power began to slip. In November 1972, Nixon won a landslide re-election victory, but the Watergate scandal continued to simmer just below the surface. The following year, 1973, would prove to be a pivotal one in the saga, as the Senate established a select committee to investigate the break-in and subsequent cover-up. Chaired by Senator Sam Ervin, the committee's hearings would provide a national stage for the drama to unfold. In February 1973, L. Patrick Gray, the acting director of the FBI, revealed that Nixon's aides had attempted to use the CIA to halt the investigation into the break-in. This bombshell revelation sparked widespread outrage and led to the resignation of several high-ranking officials, including Attorney General Richard Kleindienst and White House counsel John Dean. As the committee's hearings progressed, it became increasingly clear that the Nixon administration had engaged in a massive cover-up, with the president himself at the center. In July 1973, it was discovered that Nixon had secretly recorded conversations in the Oval Office, including discussions about the Watergate scandal. The tapes would become a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation, and their release would ultimately lead to Nixon's downfall. As the Supreme Court ruled that Nixon must turn over the tapes to investigators, the president's options began to dwindle. On August 5, 1974, transcripts of the tapes were released, revealing that Nixon had indeed been involved in the cover-up from the beginning. The smoking gun tape, as it came to be known, showed that Nixon had ordered his aides to halt the investigation into the break-in just 6 days after it occurred. With this damning evidence now public, Nixon's support among Republicans in Congress began to crumble. On August 9, 1974, Richard Nixon became the first U.S. president to resign from office, leaving behind a legacy of scandal and deceit. As he departed the White House, he told his staff, "Always remember, others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself." These words would prove prophetic, as the Watergate scandal would go on to have a lasting impact on American politics. Today, The Watergate Scandal is remembered as a watershed moment in American history, a testament to the power of investigative journalism and the importance of checks on executive power. As historian Stanley Cutler has noted, Watergate was a constitutional crisis, a crisis of the system, and it raised fundamental questions about the nature of presidential power. The scandal's legacy can be seen in the many reforms that followed, including the establishment of independent special prosecutors and the strengthening of campaign finance laws. The Watergate scandal also had a profound impact on the American public's perception of government, leading to a decline in trust and an increase in cynicism. As Bob Woodward, one of the reporters who broke the story, has said, Watergate showed that the system can work, but it also showed that the system can be corrupted. This nuanced understanding of the scandal's significance continues to resonate today, as Americans grapple with the complexities of power and accountability. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.